All right. So far, up until today, we have been able to get an answer doing one thing. We've added, or we've subtracted, or we've multiplied, or we've divided, and then we had an isolated variable. With this problem, there are two things happening. We are adding a 7, and we're multiplying a 3. Start out by drawing the pyramid of Jemda. Sam the caveman created this thing, or he found it, but when you solve equations, it works a little bit different. And when we're solving with equations, things kind of get flipped. Because you do the inverse of every step, you also do the opposite of the pyramid of Jemdas. And when you see something happening that's adding or subtracting, you're going to do that first. Put add and subtract on the bottom, put multiply and divide, and we're not going to deal with any exponents for now. We're not going to deal with grouping today, but you can put that on there if you want. So I have a cool tool that allows me to do that. And if you don't, just write on here that you flip it and go backwards. So put like a number 1, then a number 2, then a 3, then a 4. You start, when you work with equations, with the addition and subtraction. I'm going to tell you kind of a goofy story that may get it stuck in your head on what to do, but we're going to pretend like X is a student, and X is hanging out at home, but he decided to invite 2 of his friends over. One of his friends is pretty close to him, his best friend. The other friend is an acquaintance. They're getting to know each other, but they're not as close. The 3 and the X are our closest friends since basically 1 year old, since they could remember. So this X is living in this house, and X invites 3 and 7 over. The 3 and the 7 are hanging out, and Mom comes home. And Mom's like, all right, X, you got to get to homework. These friends got to go. And so X looks around, and he says, all right, well, I'm going to do this strategically because I really want to hang out for a few more minutes. I'm going to start sending out friends one at a time. So X says, hey, 7, I'm going to have you leave first. Can you please go out the door? And 7 reverses action. Instead of walking into the door, he goes out. Do the inverse of adding 7. 7 is no longer in the house. You are left with 3 and an X. So 3 is still hanging out with X. X got a little more time with 3. They're like playing basketball inside. Don't tell Mom. It's like not supposed to happen, but they just built a basketball court somewhere in his room. And on the right side, there is now a -12. The -5 didn't get to come inside. I guess he's just kind of waiting to befriend them. The 7 groups up with them and becomes a -12. Mom's like, all right, it's been like 20 minutes. X, you gotta do homework. Get the other friend out. And so X says, all right, 3, well, let's get you out and send you on your way. And we're gonna do the inverse of multiplication. The opposite of multiplying is division. When you divide 3x by 3, the 3 is now kicked out of the house, and X is alone, ready to do homework. The -12 divided by 3 becomes a -4, and your answer is -4. Yeah. Yeah. I'm gonna pause. 3, 2, 1. Thanks for raising a hand. I have a few questions on these. I'll take a couple, but just know that this step-by-step process is your introduction to multi-step equations. It's another huge part of your math life. So we're just gonna keep getting repeated examples throughout today. If that was a little confusing, that's okay. It should be. It's brand new to you. Chad, question.
How do you get 3 friends and 7 friends?
We're going to kind of ignore the friend example for a bit. It doesn't work exactly. I'm just trying to teach you that whatever is farthest away from X, notice how the 7 wasn't as close. You move the thing that's farthest away. The 3 was really close to X, so that gets moved second. Don't really worry too much about how many friends there are and all that, because that's just a silly example you'll eventually kind of set to the side. Logan, question.
So, so let's say the number that's always next to this, like the variable, is the one that gets dropped down and gets to hang out for a little bit longer.
Mhm. That's correct.
Okay.
So since the 3 is closest to x, they're like best friends. It's closer. They're best friends because they're close. This gets to stay a little longer. You do this after you subtract. You divide the 3 after you subtract. Other question, Raiden, did you have one? Did it get answered? Say it again. Yep. A -5 and a -7. Yep. Max.
So the 7 turns into a negative
Correct. Jed.
I just found out.
Yeah.
The -7 subtract 3 is a -4. So
That's a coincidence. Don't get that in your head. Those things just kind of relate to each other by coincidence, but you'll have to do the steps. Aiden.
When you do that, it makes math fun.
Cool.
Can you do that for every
Stories, you guys, I've been teaching for 7 years and I'm trying to work stories into most things. Some of them are nearly impossible and I'm still racking my brain. Like on summer vacation, I will literally be like driving to some place with my family. And I'll be like, oh, that's brilliant. I'll use this for percents. And then I like have a random thought. It doesn't happen for everything. I'll warn you later on this year, things get kind of like storyless and a little more just mathy. However, there are things that will become a story, like today. Here are the steps. Big ideas of what we just did. We're gonna isolate the variable no matter what. If it's 1-step equation, 2 steps, my 8th graders are working on like 6-step equations. You always isolate the variable, and to do that, first put isolate. So this means you're solving. So we isolate the variable to figure what it is. To isolate it, we're always trying to get it by itself. So big idea, the same as 1-step equations, you have to find the variable by itself. It's got to be on one side, which is why we draw this line, to make sure it's on one side. To isolate a variable, we do inverse operations, meaning we undo everything we've done to this variable by using the inverse. Inverse means opposite.
Why are you such a fast writer?
he's built different.
Did I tell you the 4th grade story yet?
No.
When I was in 4th grade. My first years of teaching in Sacramento, I taught 4th grade. I thought I told you this. And so my 4th graders in Sacramento, my first year teaching, I taught 183 days, which is a school year. And like the sweetest little girl, Jasmine, like she like barely talked all year. She obeyed everything I said. She comes up and says, "Mr. McAtee," gives me a little card. I just have one request. Can you please work on your handwriting because I couldn't read a word you said, or like you wrote on a board. And I was like, I'm glad that you learned nothing that I wrote. Like you couldn't, it wasn't legible. So I tried to, I'm still not perfect, you guys. It's kind of sloppy.
But how do you write?
I write quickly because I've practiced a lot. With that being said, if you ever can't read the board, please raise your hand. I will not be offended. Also, if I'm going too fast, just raise your hand or put me like a thumb down. I know you're not booing me off the stage. You're just having me slow down. Yes.
Yay! Am I like that little girl? 'Cause I obey
I'm
everything.
gonna pause you. Yeah.
Is that isolate or
This is isolate and inverse. Yeah. Last big idea that is the same. 3, 2, 1. Last big idea is to maintain equivalency. This is the same as 1-step equations, but it is really important to maintain equivalency. It means that whatever you do to one side, you have to do to the other. Equivalency means doing one thing to the other. If you add 7 to the other. Subtract 3, subtract 3. Multiply 2, multiply 2. Next page. Here's some examples, and like I said, it's going to get more comfortable the more you do it. If you're not quite confident, that's okay. Draw your line down the equal sign. Remember that x is hanging out with friends -6 and -9. There's one friend that is farther away from him. The 6 is close up to the x. Here's the house. We're not going to worry about the 4 because 4 is not in the house. Mom comes home and says, hey, friends gotta go. You do the inverse of a negative 9. Inverse of minus 9 is adding 9. And 6 and x are still hanging out. The 9 is a pretty good friend, but not as close. 4 plus 9 is 13. This canceled, but x isn't isolated. Yet, he's still hanging out with a friend. What's happening to that negative 6 and that x in math terms? What is actually going on, Sierra? It's going to have to be divided to inverse it, correct. But what's actually happening, Sierra? What's the opposite of division? It's actually being multiplied right now. So you're not wrong. This step would be to divide. Because they're being multiplied originally in the problem, you do the inverse. Negative 6 is divided by negative 6, which leaves just x. 13 is divided by negative 6, which is just a fraction of 13 over 6, but negative. If you have one negative number, mathematicians will like to write this with the negative just right outside of the fraction bar. So put the negative right in front of the fraction bar and put 13 over 6. Jameson, do you want to simplify it?
X goes in the 12 two times, so 2, and then there's 1/6 left over, so it's negative 2 and 1/6.
Good. Let me check what the answers look like. Today I'm not too worried about you simplifying it, but if the answers are in mixed number form, it's probably going to be easier. Ooh, good. Your answers don't have fractions, so I'm okay with you today on examples not simplifying it. Max. I don't know. It got copied. I think it got slid in from another class. You can ignore it. Example 2, draw a line down the middle. N is over 8. These guys are best friends. They're closest together. N is being divided by 8. There's also a minus 5 hanging out. This time the house is on the right. What would I do first? What's my first step to this equation to solve it, Logan?
Well, first you would put the line slightly under that.
Okay, we just did that.
No, like vertically. And
Like-
anyway, then you would do an inverse to the negative 5, which would be plus 5.
And notice where I'm putting the plus 5 right underneath the negative 5. I want to see that this is happening to the negative. Got it. Okay. Negative 3 plus 5 is what, Logan? Okay. And you're left with n over 8. N is hanging out with 8, but what's actually happening with the n and the 8 in the math world, Cameron? Are these guys multiplying or dividing? N over 8, let's compare it with this, Cameron. If the 8 is next to the n, this means multiplied if it's squished together. If you have a fraction bar, this guy is actually going to mean what operation? Division. Anytime you see a fraction bar, it's the same thing as division. N over 8 is the same thing as n divided by 8. So to do the opposite of division, Cameron, what would I have to do? Good. Multiply by 8. Because it's a fraction, I want to make it 8 over 1. What do I do on the left side, Mason? That's fine. Do I have to put it as 8 over 1, whole class?
No.
Daniel, because it's a whole number, what could I list it as? Just an 8. You're not wrong, Mason. You could put 8 over 1, but because it's being multiplied by a whole number, you don't have to make it a fraction. That's only if you have a fraction like this. Yeah, you could. So we don't need that extra step, but good thoughts. 8 times 2 is 16. What's left on the right side of this, Jackson? What is left over after I multiply by 8? Yeah, and n over 1 is the same thing as what? Just an n. You get n equals 16 or 16 equals n. That is your answer. Last example. Oh, are there 4? I'm going to have you do example 4 as a you try, because it is similar to number 2. Okay, last example together, then you'll try this next one on your own. I have negative 2n and a 16 on the left side of the house. Who do I move first, Justice?
The negative 16.
Cool.
Gotta put a house.
Sure. All right, what is on the left side, Hadley, after I subtract 16? Is it just a 2n? And the negative sign. Don't forget that minus sign. It's a bad guy 2n, not a good guy. What's negative 20 minus 16? Silent hands. Negative 20 minus 16. Reese, is that a hand?
Oh,
Close.
Oh.
Those are bad guys fighting,
Oh.
but these guys are banding. If you band them together, what do you do when they group up? So what is 20 and 16 added together? Good. It's bad guy 36. Okay. We are almost done. Justice, what's my last step to get N by himself so we can do some homework? Or she?
It's a he.
Sure.
Negative 2 by 2.
Would I divide the negative 2 by a positive 2 or a negative 2? Why would it be negative for this one, Chad?
because same good different bad.
So that's what we're going to think about, but the reasoning is equivalency, that word we wrote. You have to do the exact same thing to the left as the right. I can't change anything about it, and changing the negative to a positive changes the sign. N would equal 36 negative divided by 2 negative. If you have that answer, raise your hand. Be precise with the negatives. What would 36 divided by 2 be? And you said it was positive or negative? Same good, different bad. N is equal to 18. Last example, you're doing these on your own. 36 divided by 2 is 18. 18?
18.
Because 2 times 8 is 16. No, because same good different bad.
Let's pause and think about it. A negative divided by a negative. Since 36 was originally negative and the 2 is originally negative, you're going to have 2 negatives. 2 negatives do make a positive. Same good, different bad when you multiply. Same good, different bad when you divide. Any more questions on that? It's a great thing to bring up. Thanks if that was you who thought it was a negative. That's helping our team. I appreciate you bringing that up. Example 4, do on your own in the next minute. If you have the answer, check in with your partner to see if they do. If they don't, just give them a few more seconds. You got it? You need a pencil? Yeah, go ahead. Daniel, are you done? Max, are you done? What would I do first, Max? What would I do? Yeah, this looks a little funny because there's no plus sign in front of the 3, but it is positive because it's a positive 3. So I'm going to move that guy first. He's farthest away from X. There's your first step. What's your second step? Finish that, then you can go. Negative 10 minus 3 is 13. Silent hand if you have the answer, and then you'll give me the last step. Chad, what did you get for this one?
I got the answer of x equals 52.
If you multiply a 4 on both sides, is it just the 52, Chad?
What?
Is it just 52?
I got. No.
Because that negative 13 is there, negative times a positive would be a negative 52. If you got x equals negative 52, please turn your paper to the practice. If you have a separate piece of paper already in your binder, get it out. If not, 30 seconds to grab one over here. Yeah. So can you get a piece of binder paper? It is partner practice to start. Yeah. Justice found a blunder that I will fix.
No.
Cameron, Lauren, you can turn real quick, or just maybe even move. I see what you're doing. Yeah, just turn, and you can just move either back or he can move up. If you have a separate piece of paper, give me a thumb up. It's in front of you. I'm going to set it up in just a minute. You're going to pause on partner work because we have a blunder to take care of. Justice thinks there's a blunder in example 4. If you see a blunder as well, raise your hands. If you see the blunder, raise your hand somewhere. It's why probably a few of you were like making some like weird questioning noises. Raiden, what's my blunder? This 4. I rewrote as a positive. It changes it. Thanks, Raiden. Thanks, Justice, and Chad, a few others. This would be a -4 times a -13. And that's same good, different bad. Same signs would be a +52. Thanks for helping our team out. And Cameron or Chad, can you mark 1 for 7th grade? It is positive.